Good afternoon. I'm so glad you could come in and meet me today. My name is Karen, and as you know from the form I sent home earlier, before spring break, your child's classroom teacher had asked me to do some assessment with him, and so I've asked you to come in today so that we can talk about the assessment that I did and how he did with the assessment tasks that we did.
Okay.
So I have a report that outlines what tests I used with him and also talks about how he did with everything. So we'll go through that and we'll talk about what that means, and then we can talk about some of the things that I think and what your opinion is on the things that would be helpful in helping him be successful at school.
All right.
Okay. So before we go too far, when I talked with the classroom teacher and we met about Richie, she had some concerns. Do you have concerns about Richie?
I do. Mainly with his reading, his math, and his writing. He's not really doing very well in those areas.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts about why those might be really hard for him?
Actually, I'm not really sure. He's a good boy. He's very sweet and obedient and helpful.
Mm-hmm.
He suffers from a bit of anxiety, but he loves to ride his bike, and he has made some friends this year at school, which I'm happy about.
That's nice to see, isn't it? Because I remember when he was younger, he really struggled with that, right? He seemed so very shy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is one of the things, because I've worked with him for a long time, and I know that he's really struggled to develop skills in reading, writing, and math. He's really had a hard time with that.
He has.
He's had learning assistants since kindergarten, and that has all been focused on trying to help him learn to read. So we started with like basic skills like rhyming and those sorts of things in kindergarten and learning his letter sounds. And since then we worked on sight words and being able to send out words and those sorts of things. And it's coming quite slowly. And at this time his classroom teacher tells me that he's working about the grade 1 level in his reading, writing, and math. I've worked with Richie for quite some time, and so he and I know one another quite well. So I found that when I took him to do the assessment, he was quite willing to come with me. You had let him know ahead of time that I would be doing this, so he wasn't surprised to see me. He didn't seem nervous by doing the activities, but I did notice a lot of anxious type behaviors. So there was lots of wiggling and hands that were moving a lot. For the most part, he seemed to understand the activities that I asked him to do. He was quite attentive. He had good eye contact. He listened to everything. And even when he was doing a lot of moving around, he always seemed to be focused on the task. And even if, a noise outside the classroom or something disrupted him for a minute, he was quite quick to bring his attention back to what we were doing. And so based on that, I think the results of the assessment is pretty reliable. I think that if we were to do this again, the results would come up quite similarly for him.
All right.
Okay. So as you know from the permission form I sent home, I did several different assessments with Richie. A lot of them were looking at some of those academic skills. The one area that I didn't do an in-depth assessment of was writing, because he seemed, while he was very willing to do a lot of the assessment for me, I didn't want to push him to the point where he wasn't enjoying himself anymore. And writing is, from my observations in class and from what the teachers told me, writing is probably the most difficult thing for him. So I didn't look at that. I just have looked at some of his work samples in the classroom. I did, though, look at motor integration, which is the physical part of writing, to see if that gave us any clues.
Okay.
So the first assessment that I did with him is called the Wide-Ranging Achievement Test. And it is a fairly general assessment of academic skills. So it looks at sentence comprehension, spelling, math computation, and word reading. The Wide Range Achievement Test is what we call a norm reference test. So this means that the developers of the test went out and they tested a wide range of people of the age range that the test is for. So this test is for children between the ages of 5 and 17, really. And so they tested lots of kids in those age ranges. And they looked at each age and said, sort of all the kids we tested, most of the kids were here. So they called that the average range. And then there were fewer kids out here. So these are more unique performance levels. And so for the wide-ranging achievement test, we're looking at students being considered average with scores between 85 and 115. These are called standard scores. And so that's what we sort of consider the average range. Students that fall sort of below that, between 70 and 85, we consider to be below average. These are kids that are going to struggle a bit.
Right.
And then 70 to 55 is well below average, and these are children who are going to struggle quite a bit. 100 is considered the average, like the very middle of average, and so we compare it that way. The other way that we can talk about students' performance is what we call percentile ranking. And so you can think of it as being, if there was 100 students all Richie's age, and if he was at the 45th percentile, that means that he did better than 45 out of the 100 children.
Right.
Right? Okay. So when we look at the scores for the WRAT, you can see that Richie's scores overall are quite low. So his word reading is falling right in this area. Right? At 71, he's at the sort of the bottom end of the below average range.
Right.
69 is just over the line in well below average. 78, which was his spelling score, is sort of his strength here. And I could see that when we were doing the spelling tests, and he actually commented to me that some of the words were words that were on a spelling test this week. And so he was quite excited because he knew how to spell those ones. The other words that I gave him, he really tried hard, and I could tell that he was using a lot of his phonics skills. So even if he didn't know how to spell the word, he was working really hard to break the word down into the sounds that he heard and write those. Often forgot or left out, didn't hear the vowel sounds, but he got most of the consonants.
Okay.
But you can still see that still in the below average range. And given his performance in class, I'm not surprised by this because there is a significant delay in his reading, writing, and math, considering he's in grade 4 this year. Math computation is also in this range. So we can see that while spelling of words is a strength here, most of the other areas he is really struggling. Word reading he struggled with. Sentence comprehension is his lowest subtest score. And this is an activity where he's given a sentence or two or even a short paragraph, and there are words left out or a word left out. So he has to read it and then tell me what word goes in the blank.
Okay.
And because of his low reading skills, he really struggled with this task. He had a hard time figuring out what would go in the blank, mostly because he couldn't read the rest of it.
Yeah.
Right. his reading composite score at 68, this is simply a combination of his word reading and sentence comprehension tasks. And so given that they're both quite low, it's not surprising that his reading composite is low as well.